Welcome everybody. We are doing this awesome webinar. We have two guest speakers. We have one this Monday, or two guest speakers today, and then three guest speakers next Monday at the same time. And they're going to be discussing some of the soft skills that we have, or that are very important for industry and business, for communication, and how to make sure that your workplace etiquette is the best possible. Also some of the skills that are needed to be successful in the workplace. And first guest speaker we have is Mr. Jody Trantham. He comes to us from Houston, Texas right now. He has worked in over 30 different countries across the world, and he's worked on every continent except for Antarctica, which is probably someplace you probably want to work in the future, I'm assuming, Mr. Trantham. He has been in charge of some of the largest oil and gas projects across the world. Pretty interesting. And then secondly, we have Mr. Lambert, who works in telematics and helps run a fleet of people to help fleet industries such as like Amazon, packaging, and stuff like that, for transportation of different items and sales groups. So if you could start, Mr. Jody, say something about yourself and go ahead. Thank you very much for coming.
Excellent. I hope you guys can hear me okay. If anything cuts out, then just, ping me, let me know. But I appreciate you guys inviting me to come and talk to you guys. Mr. Chase and I actually grew up together, or at least went to college together. I went to Colorado School of Mines, got a mechanical engineering degree. Both Mr. Chase and myself wrestled, and then after I graduated from Colorado School of Mines with my mechanical engineering degree, also moved to Houston, Texas, started working for ExxonMobil, and have been here for about 20 years managing projects in the oil and gas industry. So more specifically, from a professional standpoint, I have been involved with designing and building, installing, and starting up some of these large oil and gas facilities, either onshore or offshore. And I've had the opportunity to work and travel to over 30 different countries. So as he mentioned, it's been a big part of my professional career. But when Mr. Chase asked me to speak with you guys around what are skills and tools and assets that you're going to need in the future to survive, to thrive, to be more successful, more content, I decided I wanted to talk with you guys and put maybe a little bit different spin on some things. So I'm just going to jump right into that to talk about probably the most important asset that you can have is your health. Okay? Without your health, you can't do anything. Life is going to be pretty difficult. Without your health, you don't have any wealth. So as you guys grow up and as you get older, you really need to put a core emphasis on staying in shape. Okay, and that's done through whether it's eating healthy or exercising 30 minutes a day, at a minimum. And exercising is more than just going to the gym and throwing up heavy weights, and it's more than just going to a yoga class, right? You really need to get your heart rate up at least 30 minutes a day. And that's probably the biggest advice that I could give people. And it's the hardest, especially as you get older and you slow down and you have injuries or you get busy with family life. But if you don't concentrate on keeping yourself healthy, nothing else is going to line up for you. So, okay, with that being said, there is a new set of skills that are going to be required in the future. Right? These are different skill sets than perhaps our parents and our grandparents and great grandparents have had, because the world is changing. Right? Things are no longer the same. Right? The old advice of go to school, get good grades, and get a good job, and save your money, and you'll be fine. Right? That's no longer the case. We are in in a much different environment now. And I'm going to talk to you guys about how that is, and some tools that you can do to help prepare yourself and prepare your families for that. So he, one of the key words or buzzwords that you might hear lately is the term resilience. And what does resilience mean? That means that you're able to get knocked down and get back up. Right? You're able to be broken down and come together and build something stronger and better. Right? You have to be resilient, and being resilient is one of the probably the most important aspects of of moving forward through all different types of obstacles. And obstacles come at you in different shapes and forms, but if you have a resilience mindset, the attitude, the drive, the spirit, all of these things, if you have that, then you can overcome a heck of a lot of things. And as a part of being resilient, the word or the animal, the chameleon, comes to mind. And what is a chameleon? I think some of you guys probably know, right? It's a lizard that changes color depending on its environment. Well, in the future, you're going to have to be a chameleon. And what I mean by that is you're going to have to know how to put on a set of business clothes and go negotiate with some Japanese corporate board members on one day, and the next day you need to learn how to, or be able to put on a set of overalls and go talk with a farmer about how to weld or fix some equipment that he has. Gone are the days where you can survive with just one skill. You got to know how to plant, how to garden, how to hunt, how to sew, how to weld, how to be an electrician, how to be a carpenter, right? How to cook food, right? How to care for your elderly parents. There's a whole suite of skills that are going to be required, probably more so in the future, if you need or if you want to be resilient. So I hope that makes sense to some of you guys. And if it doesn't necessarily make sense now, at least remember this in 4 or 5 years, 10 years down the road. I hope that you can reflect on some of that and learn how to be resilient. So the next thing I want to do, I'm going to share my screen here. I hope everybody can see it well. So yeah, folks, jump in here if you cannot, but okay. Financial education. Okay, this is probably another core area that you as students and future family people are gonna have to really turn your focus to, right? And it's financial education. They don't teach you financial education in school, right? You might take an accounting class or an economics class, but it really does not even come close to scratching the itch. Right now, our educational system is really good at grooming and developing employees for the future, very similar to how our military grooms soldiers. Right? But it doesn't really teach you on how to step out and how to have your money work for you, or how to have other people work for you. And this is what we're looking at right now, is something called the cash flow quadrant. I'm taking this from a famous author named Robert Kiyosaki. You guys may have heard of him. He's written a whole suite of books under the Rich Dad Poor Dad series. But what I like about this cash flow quadrant that he had developed and explains is that everybody falls into one or more of these quadrants. The left-hand side is a group of people, either employees or self-employed, that have to actively work for their money. Okay, if you look at an employee, okay, an employee is somebody like a teacher, an engineer, somebody who works at the grocery store, right? They actively work for their paycheck. They have to put in time to get money. Underneath that is the self-employed person, and self-employed could be a doctor, could be a lawyer, could be a plumber, right? But there's somebody that they own their own business, they're their own boss. But again, if they don't work, they don't get paid. That's the left-hand side of this quadrant. The right-hand side is where you have business owners and investors. This is where the real money is at, the real power, right? The people that control every element or every aspect of our lives typically fall under the B or the I category, right? So the business owner, right? That is somebody who owns a business that roughly has at least 500 employees. And there's somebody who can disappear for a year and come back and the business is growing and it's even stronger than before, right? It doesn't take their active involvement. And then underneath that is the investor. This is somebody who has invested in a way that their money is what makes more money. So the reason I'm showing this to everybody here is that our even though we have the best probably educational system in the world, it still only really teaches you how to be an E, right? And maybe an S. But if you want true security, true resilience, right? If you want to reach your maximum potential, you need to move over into the B and the I quadrants. And there's nothing wrong with straddling. You can be an E and an I at the same time. In fact, if you start to straddle these quadrants, that's where you start to really get a lot of stability and security and ultimate wealth generation. So for anybody that wants to learn more about this, there's or at least this type of mindset. I mentioned Robert Kiyosaki is the author, but if you just do a search for Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right, and you look at that, you can start at least kickstart your financial education. And it reminds me of a quote that I had heard the dean of my college say at one time. He had said that he is, as the dean, right, the kind of the head guy at the college, he was always nice to the A students and the C students. And that's because the A students would come back and be his professors, and the C students would come back and own all the buildings that the campus operated under. Okay? And I think you probably understand the point, right? A students are really good at E's here or S's, but it's really the C students that learned how to become the business owners and the investors. So good. Okay, so let's see. I did mention, I am going to stop sharing here for a second. So I did mention that we're in a different world than what our grandparents and our parents grew up in. And this all has to do with our currency, the US dollar. For a couple hundred years of our country's existence, it was pegged by gold. We were on a gold standard. In 1971, Nixon took us off that gold standard. And what that did was that allowed the dollar, which is a measurement of something, whether it's real tangible property or services. As soon as that dollar came off the gold standard, it became a fiat currency, and ultimately, it is losing its value. It is losing its value at an accelerating rate, and so through inflation. And I think you guys are probably familiar with the term inflation. But if you look at the US government's deficit, we have printed more money in the year 2020 than we have printed in the first 250 years of this country. Okay? So we are on the cusp of losing the currency, the U.S. dollar as we know it today, and we're gonna transition to something else, and it's probably going to happen within the next 5 to 10 years. And so the old adage of go to school, get good grades, get a good job, and save your dollars, that's no longer a viable option if those dollars are losing value, especially if that is going to be accelerating. So that's where financial education, your financial knowledge, learning how to do those things, that's what's going to be really important in this new era, right? It's not something that our parents or grandparents had to face, but it's something that we are going to have to face. So do as much as you can, learn everything that you can financially, about currencies, about professions, add to your toolkit from skills, right? Learn how to weld, learn how to sew, learn how to plant foods. Um, well, I think that's probably it that I wanted to talk to you here. There's a couple things maybe I'll mention is that uh, softer skills, right? Softer skills, whenever, yeah, there's a whole suite of really good skills, um, and they're all essential. The first one I would probably want to highlight is the ability to listen. If you really want to know who are some of the exceptional leaders in history, in the corporate world, uh, what really made them stand out is their ability to listen, right? To really listen and understand the people, the problems before they act. Now, are you a good listener? How do you know? One way to do it is if while you're engaging in a conversation with somebody and you're listening to them talk, there's a difference between listening and hearing. if if while they're talking, you're formulating in your mind, the what you're going to say next, or if you're waiting for them to finish talking so that you can start talking, then you automatically should know you're not a good listener. The truly good listeners are the people that can put their mind on pause and really kind of go into a zen type moment where they're really trying to understand what the other person is telling them. Once they understand, or once they hear it all, then their mind will kick into gear, and then they start making decisions or responding or whatever. But to be a good listener, you have to truly put aside your own preconceived notions, your thoughts, and really get into the moment. And you guys will experience that as you move into your careers, and you'll have good bosses and bad bosses, but you'll know when somebody is truly listening to you, and it'll be a remarkable moment once you can understand the difference between somebody who just hears and somebody who really listens. All right, Mr. Chase, what else? I think you might have had some questions that you've collected earlier. Are we going to save those towards the end?
All right. Sorry, Jody. I was
You
muted.
might be.
Yeah. So
Okay,
we
sure.
can ask. Let's ask those. Answer those questions at the end. Okay. Or would you like to answer them now and let Ty go to the end?
Whatever works. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Whatever works.
I think answering now would be a good time. Then you can get back
Sure.
to your work too. So a good question that somebody asked. It says, for communication soft skills, I have a speech impediment and have trouble communicating with a lot of people. How could I overcome that, or would I be deducted points because of that in my work environment?
Sure. No, okay. So actually, I think speech impediments can actually go in your favor. Okay. And whether it's a stutter or somebody talks really softly or slowly, and what that does is that breaks the rhythm of a typical conversation. Right? If you're in meetings and you have somebody says something and somebody else goes back and it just kind of like ping pong back and forth. But if you got somebody who, again, speaks differently with an accent, with a stutter, slower, it makes the whole room stop and listen, right? It makes them actually have to listen a little bit more. So I found people that do talk differently, again, whether it's an impediment or an accent, or they just talk really lightly, they tend to get heard or listened to more so than those who speak fast or speak normally, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Jody. I have another one here.
So,
This one was something that came up a lot. It says, how do you develop these soft skills, and which ones are the most important, challenging ones to develop? What soft skills are more important in your career? I think you already answered the last
yes.
one.
That's right. Yeah, I think listening is a pretty big one. Maybe another one is truly understanding that no one is better than you, but on the flip side, that you are better than no one. Okay? We're all in this together equally. We all have an equal amount, or should have an equal amount of votes or equity that we bring to the table. And soon as you can understand that concept, that you're not better than anybody else, and nobody else is better than you, then you can really start to make an impact or influencing the organization or your boss or your coworkers, because they know you care. They know they don't think you're better than them or them better than you. And so again, that's probably not a skill that you can put your hand on, your finger on, but being able to know that everyone is equal is something that allows you to be more persuasive and influencing with your coworkers, with the organization. And maybe I might give kind of a good example of this. This was back when I was in college. I was taking a chemistry class, and it's probably one of my worst subjects. I was never all that good at chemistry. And I forget whether I was had a C in the class or something like that, but it wasn't the best. We're at the final. We're taking our finals, and the instructor had said, "Okay, I have a bonus question for you guys. I'm going to ask it right at the very end, and you're going to have like 10 seconds to write down the answer. And this bonus question is going to be worth 30% of the grade." So, and 30% of the final for this class was enough to easily jump you up to your overall grade in the class from like a C to an A. I mean, it was a pretty significant test. So we're done with the test. 10 seconds left, and the instructor asks, he says, "What is the name of the janitor lady that you walk past as you leave this class every day?" You give us 10 seconds to write it down. Okay. And fortunately for me, I knew it because I have the personality. I like to talk to everybody as I get to know them. And Maria was her name. All right, so I wrote down Maria, and I ended up getting, I think, a B, maybe even an A in that class. I mean, it was that significant of a jump, and it had nothing to do with chemistry, the chemistry course itself. The life lesson he was trying to teach is that everybody plays a part in society and what we do, and they all need to be treated with respect. And if you realize that, you're going to succeed more so in life than if you don't.
Hey, thank you, Jody. And there's a couple other questions that I think you could, we'll have you answer on the backside. And I think they're very beneficial questions to answer. So I'll give you a little bit more time to think about it. But if you go on the Q&A part, they're in there, maybe you can type in an answer. I think you have access to do that. So thank you so much, Mr. Trantham, for talking to our classes. And we look forward to hearing some of the answers to the other questions that kids have asked. That's great. And I think we've all learned a lot from this 20-minute talk. Now I'd like to introduce Mr. Lambert. Mr. Lambert works for IntelliShift Telematics. And thank you, Ty. And go ahead and go.
Hey, thanks, Matt. As Matt said, my name is Ty Lambert. Start off by thanking the team for inviting me to contribute to this session on soft skills, and as well as all of you for joining, because the fact that you're joining is that part is commendable, because it means you're starting to think about what you want to do and what steps you might need to get there. Now, my background isn't all that different from a lot of the folks here in Camas. I grew up in a small town. I grew up on a farm in Kansas where we raised cattle and farmed. I played sports in high school. I was in several clubs. I participated. But when I graduated high school, I had absolutely no clue what I wanted to do for work. So I went to college, and that was the first time that I was on my own. But I was making friends, but I also focused on making the right kind of friends. And it was after high school, in college, where I met a friend whose father was a headhunter. He was a recruiter. And so when I was ready to start looking for a job, I asked and he agreed to help me. And so I saved my money and I flew to Denver, and I flew to meet him so he could coach me on how to interview, how to present myself. And one little pearl of information they gave me that stuck with me was, anytime you're interviewing or you're in a meeting where there's a little bit of tension or you're going to be nervous, a lot of times when you get seated, they'll offer you something to drink. Always accept it. And when they hand it to you, if they set it down, leave it. Don't touch it, because all you can do is spill it. So just leave it alone. And when I was younger, my first response was, well, I could take a sip, but all that is just getting lucky and spilling it in your mouth. So leave it alone, because in a situation like that, if something goes wrong, if you spill it on your shirt or your blouse, now that just compounds the level of nervousness into the meeting that you're in. So just leave it alone. Always accept, be polite, but leave it alone. So I got some coaching there, and I got my first job, and it was selling cell phones to businesses. And then, now mind you, this is when they first came out, the real big ones. And it wasn't selling cell phones like in a mall. It wasn't in a kiosk, but it was going out and talking to businesses. And I learned a lot from this job. And I just learned from there that I wanted to know more about business. And that was a goal that I had. I wanted to get more in depth. So I went back to school and got my MBA and focused on business. Now, mind you, I kept working during my MBA program. So I was working during the day and going to school at night, and it was tough. But I was pushing myself because I really wanted to learn. So with that knowledge, and being able to learn while I was on the job as well as in school, I learned the foundation there. I started 6 different businesses, and those businesses provided for my family for 12 years. And I stayed curious, and I kept wanting to learn, and it helped me find my own little successes along the way. So since I was still making friends during this process, one friend of mine asked if I would be interested in joining a global team where they felt where a lot of my skills would be valuable. So I joined this company out of Europe. It's a company called TomTom. They're based out of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And so I ran the channel sales divisions for the US and Canada, and I did that for 6 years. Had a lot of success with that, which led me to the role that I'm in today, where I'm the customer success director for a company out of New York. Still focusing on how large companies that have a fleet of vehicles, how they manage those fleets. What kind of data can they get from every vehicle, where it's going, where it needs to go, getting all that information and bringing it back. But the role that I'm in now is not focused on selling, but focusing on what the customer's outcomes are. What goals do they have? They bought it. What do they want to get out of it? So it's focusing on the outcomes after they purchase it. So that's a little bit of the background of where I came from. Now, let me jump into the soft skills that I chose to talk about, and I've got 3 of them here. And I'll start by piggybacking on Jody's topic of listening. Now, listening, what I'm speaking at, this goes beyond what your parents and your teachers are always getting on to you about. I'm talking about listening for the right reasons, listening to try to engage, to try to make a connection. Now, one of the things that came natural to me was I remember names. When I meet somebody and I see their face and I have a conversation, I remember names pretty well. But it's also one that's easy to practice. And I've worked with my teams on this in the past, where when you are engaging, and similar to Jody's point, when you're not thinking about or listening just to have a response, but listening to engage, that becomes a whole different level of connection. Now, I want to focus on that one, because a lot of times when you're listening, it's easy to start to think about what you want to say. And there's a quote from Walt Whitman that says, "Be curious, not judgmental." We're in a world today where it's easy to shoot off an idea or to have your own opinion really quick. And I like this quote, and I was hoping you guys would make note of that. Remember that. Be curious. Try to meet somebody and really engage with them to get that information, as well as yourself. Open up. Have conversations where they can get to know you as well. Because when you have the ability of remembering that person, and let's say you see them outside of the business world, outside of class, and you say, "Hey, Tommy, good to see you." And they don't remember your name, but you remember theirs, that puts you at a different level. You'll be remembered that way. So that was one of the soft skills I wanted to talk about. The second one is optimism, because staying positive is tough. And we're in a world now where it's so easy to throw digs at somebody, whether it be on social media and text message, or if you turn on the TV, it's tough to stay positive. And this is one that I hope you guys are not just dismissing this, because there's things related to goals that I wanted to talk about with this. There's a quote that my father used to use, which is, "You'll always find what you're looking for." Now, if you're looking for ways to stay optimistic, where you have a goal and you're being positive, you want to look for ways of, how can I get this done? You'll find them. If you want to look for obstacles or a reason to feel like you can't achieve it, believe me, you'll find those too. So, but when you set your goals, no matter how big or small, keep them. Focus on what you have to do to achieve, because you're going to have a ton of obstacles out there, and it's all a matter of mindset. Now, there's another influencer that he's on the web. You guys may have heard him. If you haven't, I encourage you to look this one up. His name is Simon Sinek. His last name is spelled S-I-N-E-K. And he tells a story about a marathon. And if you Google Simon Sinek marathon, you'll see the video. But it's a cool story. And basically, he and his buddy ran a marathon. And after a race, they usually have fruit or juice boxes or bagels or something, some free food at the end. In his story here, he talks about when they got done with the race, he looked at his buddy and said, "Hey, there's free bagels over there. Let's go get one." And his friend saw the line of people waiting to get free bagels. And his friend says, "No, that line's too long. I don't want that." Simon said, "Yeah, but it's free bagels." And his friend again said, I don't want to wait in that line. And what how he goes on with this is that it's all a matter of mindset. Simon had the objective, and his goal is, I want that bagel. Where his friend was only looking at the obstacles that he had to overcome to get the free bagel. So how you view your goals and how to achieve them, you have to stay optimistic. So I encourage you to Google that one to hear it said well. I paraphrased a lot of it, but I hope you got the point on that, on always know what you're looking for and make sure you've got your goals set. The third and final soft skill that I was going to bring up was talking about proactive communication. And I saw some of the questions that you guys had entered before the session here. And I think this will be helpful. Whether you're working on a high school project or you're in college or your first job, giving updates on your status is a huge winner. And it has been in my career. The person that you report to many times will have more than just you reporting to them, and they report to somebody else. So being proactive and saying, hey, here's what I did this week. Here's what I struggled with, but here's what I'm going to do next week. Just quick little updates. It can be bullet points, make it simple, but what it does is it gives you more visibility, not just with your manager or your superior. Now, some think that this may open you up to be criticized, but I challenge that. And with my experience, I can say that this soft skill is probably one of the top ones for me, because what it does is it eliminates that gray area. The questions that your superior may have, hey, are you on track? Are you spending your time wisely? Are you getting the concepts that we've trained you on? And do you know how to use them? So it does take some courage to do it, but it's showing confidence that, hey, here's what I'm doing. I think I'm doing it right. If I'm not, coach me, help me stay between the white lines. But it's also showing that you can stay extremely organized. You know what you're doing and you know what your goals are. So that's the three soft skills that I had chose to talk about. And I'll close with one of the other questions that the team here talked about was, what do I think of some notable areas to consider for students to think about on a career or future employment? There's a shift going on within the last 5 years where businesses, they have a sales group, they've got development, finance, all different divisions. There's a trend coming now talking about customer success. And what it's done is it's taken an account manager who usually just handles the day-to-day operations for a business. But customer success is really focusing on making sure that once they're a customer, that the business objectives are aligned with the vendor. So making sure that it's not just does it work, but why? What are the goals they're trying to achieve? And it's a huge industry that's really growing right now. And it focuses on giving opportunities to young folks that understand business, but can be molded into this type of a department. So that's one that is definitely one to check out, because it's easy for younger people to get the education, whether it be from life experience or going through through school to get it, but it's one that's easy to be moldable. So that's one that I wanted to talk about. So Matt, that was what I had for this today.
Thank you, Ty. Looks like we're finishing right on time. If anybody has any questions, please ask a question quickly in the Q&A. Jody's still on here and Ty is still on here. So go ahead and ask away, and we'll try to answer those live or on the Q&A typed. So, or if you have raise your hand, I can ask you. You can give you permission. So I know both of you guys have started your own business. Having started your own business, what mistakes did you make, and what advice would you give to someone looking to start their own? Would one of you like to answer that live?
Go ahead, Jody.
Sure. Try and at least take a first stab at it. Yeah. So I have started several different businesses and bought and grew some of them. My first one was a transmission repair shop, and I decided my first business was going to be an established one, buying an existing one because it would have already been up and running. It would have more of a success rate for me, but I still needed to learn. So I bought into a franchised company, Cotman Transmissions at the time, which has been bought out by Amco since then. But I learned a lot. I didn't lose money in that first venture, and I think that probably gave me a little bit of a false sense of security and abilities. And so my second one was an online business directory that I started up, but by then I had overconfidence in my abilities to start a business from scratch, and so that one I ended up selling ultimately at a loss. And I probably learned more from that business ventures, my failure, than I did in my previous success. And then the third business that I opened up and started has been which I'm still the owner of. It's a do-it-yourself emergency water well drilling company, and that one has been for about 5 years now. I think that because of some of my failures in my previous business, I learned from it. Right? I grew from it, and this next one has been probably my most successful venture yet, but it's because of the failures that I had in the previous one. So yeah, back to that resilience deal. Just because you lost or you failed in one, that's probably the best teacher for the success in the future ones. And maybe one of the things that I guess it brings to a point is that it's important that you understand that the past doesn't really exist. Okay? Just because I was a failure in the past, or just because I was successful in the past, that really doesn't have a lot of bearing as to where I'm at today or what my future is like. And you can choose to reach into your past and pull out lessons learned that you want to carry into the future. But in reality, I'm still just a piece of meat. I'm a skeleton with muscle around it. There's no anything that's happened in my past should have no bearing of who and what I am in the future, unless I choose it to be. So I mentioned that because I'm sure there's folks on here that have, maybe come from poor or lower economic families that has no bearing as to where you're going to be in the future. And conversely, you could come from a rich, highly educated family. That does not mean anything as far as where you're going to go in the future, right? So we need to learn to live in the present, to lean on our previous failures and successes when necessary, but don't let them dictate your future outcome one way or the other.
Thank you, Jody. I have another one here. I think it's very, very interesting because I know Ty and I've talked about this a fair amount. It says, if you're starting out a business from scratch, how do you approach hiring out specialized labor when you have a limited budget? I know
that's an interesting one. And let me back up a little bit and kind of what Jody was talking about too. Well, I think with any time where a business has struggled, one thing advice that I'd give is really know your segment's landscape. Know who your competitors are. Know what laws and contracts are needed. Know who the players are, not just the players, who are the suppliers, who are the vendors, who are the partners. Really understand the landscape of, so for you to get involved in this, how are you going to find your niche? What's going to be your one little area that you can, that's your differentiator, right? Now, to the part where on the question about talking about outsourcing different skill sets, or there's the fact that we're remote now and everyone's working from home. There's a ton of opportunities for people looking for contract jobs, looking for, and there's even websites where you can hire somebody for a particular skill set, whether it be part-time or contract work. You need somebody to develop something, you know, in Python that'll help you create a certain spreadsheet. There's ways that you can find them where, as long as you know how to create a scope of a project and say, here's what I need this person to do, because you got to know it. You can't be looking for advice all the time. You've got to do your research on it. But if you can write a scope of a project of what you're needing, you can find through these websites people that they might not be in Camas or Washington or the United States, but if they have a skill set and the communication barrier isn't there, you can find some opportunities real inexpensive of somebody that wants to do some work and can do it for you, and you can set your own budget. So there's some ways to find it out there.
Thank you, guys. I have one that's actually I thought was very interesting, and either one of you guys can jump into this because I know both of you were young ones. It says, is it harder for someone younger to start a business due to inexperience and people's views on them being experienced? And I want to add something to this. Is it harder for an employee that is younger for the same viewpoints? I mean, so you might either be starting the business, or maybe as a young employee, how do you interact with people as a young employee, inexperienced in that field, and you're starting out? How do you, besides listening, because I think that is the number one thing both of you would say, is there anything else that they can do?
I don't see it as a negative. I think if you've got the desire, and you, like I talked about with focusing on understanding the landscape, it's going to take work, because you need to find your niche and know what players are out there and how you want to create this, and start talking to people. Talk to business owners, talk to, you know, there's different programs where you can have a mentor that can kind of help you mold a business plan, and use that as your guide. I know you'll probably get into writing business plans or marketing plans within the framework of school, but having your goal set and finding the pieces that can come into play, I encourage to give it a try. Find ways where you can do it, where it doesn't take a lot of, you're not putting yourself out on the cash side to expose yourself, but get creative. You can find a ton of ways to find your own little niche to do that, but getting the framework of your business plan, find the gaps where you need it, find a mentor or another business owner that you can talk to, and then use some of the skill sets that we talked about today to kind of help formulate that plan and go for it. I encourage it.
All right, now I think there's an interesting question. It was asked a couple times in the earlier document. It says, how do you interact with your coworkers that are on the same level with you? Because you're trying to, you know, as you're trying to work yourself up in the company. How do you interact with them if you look at them as rivals for a promotion or something like that?
I might put a little.
Go ahead, Jody.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so I might put a little bit of a different spin on that. If you really are interested in being promoted and moving up the chain, you have one concern and one concern alone, and that is, how do you make your boss look good? Okay, if you think about doing things proactively or whatever that helps your boss look good, then everything else will work out for you. Okay, so if you're sitting there focusing on how do I do something better than my rival, well, then you're focusing on the wrong things. You need to understand what it is that your boss needs. What does he need to be promoted? What does he need, or she, to be able to solve whatever problem is out there at the moment, right? If you put yourself into a problem solving mode so that you can make your boss, him or her, look good, then you're focusing your energy on the right spot. But if you're focused on how to make yourself look better than the person next to you, then yeah, it's the shallowness will will be apparent by everybody in the organization eventually. My thoughts.
Oh, I think you're spot on, Jody. The I'll go back to the point I talked about staying optimistic. It's one thing to stay competitive, because I'm competitive. I want to win, and I like having the be able to push myself and having a goal. But when it comes to a team, you have to have a different mindset about it, because to win and to make your boss look good, you need to be able to work with people. And if everybody has different skill sets, there's things that they are doing, they might be more senior than you. Getting them to talk, to help you fill in the little gaps where you can get better is huge. And if you're only viewing them as a competitor, you won't open up yourself to be able to talk to them. You won't use those listening skills to really try to, open up and get some information, but as well as sharing. Because don't forget that you're a huge resource. You're bringing a younger mindset to how to approach business, and you don't diminish your value that you're bringing. But remember that the goal is, what's the total outcome that we're trying to achieve? And when you're getting started, like Jody said, you're trying to you want to make your boss look good, but you want to be the person that can work with other people, not have the competitive side take too much of that. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
Okay, I have one last question that has come up, and I think it's something that either one of you could answer. Now I lost it for some reason, got jumped away. It was about.
If it's the one you identified, it asks, is it harder for someone younger to start a business due to inexperience and people's views on them being inexperienced?
Yeah, that was it. Did somebody answer that one in the chat?
Not yet.
Okay, that was the one I was looking for. And I know, Jody, you didn't have any experience in transmissions when you started this, so this might be something you could answer.
Sure. So I found in my experience that there are a lot of mentors out there that love to be able to take somebody under their wing and bring them alongside, right? They're at a point in their life where they want to give back to people. And I found, especially when I was young, moving into investing and as an employee, it was real easy to find mentors because I was young, inexperienced. I asked all kinds of questions, and there's a lot of folks out there that are just chomping at the bit to be able to guide you and provide you with feedback and direction, and ultimately even financial support in terms of loans and things like that. So yeah, being young, twofold. One is it helps you get your foot in the door to where others might not be able to. But then also the old saying, fake it till you make it, I thought was something that had worked pretty well too, just because I was young, didn't mean I couldn't pretend like I knew what I was doing, and then ultimately, eventually I would end up making it after faking it for a while. If that makes sense.